Hey everybody, I'm Dan Harris, host of the FantasyPros Football Podcast. Thanks for checking out our video series. It's time to talk about my top 10 waiver wire pickups for Week 16, the final week of the 2020 fantasy football season. Now, before we get into it, let's just make it clear that I'm assuming that guys like Tony Pollard and Le'Veon Bell are rostered in too many leagues to be considered here. But if they're available in your leagues, they certainly make priority pickups. All right, let's start at number 10 with JAKOBI MEYERS. Now, in an ideal world, you are not relying on any Patriots player in your championship matchup. But if you're desperate, you can look at MEYERS, who had 7 catches on 10 targets for 111 yards against the Dolphins. Against Buffalo next week, and that probably means Tre'Davious White. But the Dolphins secondary, led by Xavier Howard, is no joke, and MEYERS performed extremely well on Sunday. The Patriots are going to need points in this game, and that means throwing, and that means targets for MEYERS. In a pinch, he can be used as a flex play in Week 16. At number 9, it's Jordan Reed. Now, there are a few caveats here. It's possible that George Kittle is going to come back. Ross Dwelley played more snaps against the Cowboys. Reed totaled 18 yards or less for the third time in 4 games. But he found the end zone again for the second time in his last 3, and he has 26 targets over his last 5 games. With no Deebo Samuel, Reed should see at least his customary 5 targets per game against Arizona next week, and he'll be a potential streaming play at the tight end position for Week 16. Next up, it's time for your weekly reminder that Chad HANSEN is a pickup. After seeing 14 targets and having 12 catches in his 2 previous games, HANSEN saw just 3 targets and caught 2 of them on Sunday against Indianapolis. But he still totaled 55 yards and, more importantly, a touchdown, and he was on the field for nearly every single snap. With Cincinnati on tap, he's someone who fantasy managers can roll out there with borderline confidence as a flex play in Week 16. Next up, let's talk about another tight end, and that's Dalton Schultz. Here's what you need to know about Dalton Schultz. He plays pretty much every snap, catches all of his targets, he's got 4 touchdowns on the season, and he'll go up against a Philadelphia team that struggles against tight ends and just made Dan Arnold look like a superstar. If you're playing the tight end streaming game, Schultz is a fine option for Week 16. But Schultz is not quite as fine an option as Austin Hooper. Hooper returned from missing a game with a neck injury to post a 5-catch, 41-yard line with a touchdown against the Giants. Baker Mayfield has targeted Hooper and just the tight end position generally often near the goal line. And with the Jets on tap, any and all tight ends will be in play. With an offense like Cleveland's and with Hooper healthy, he is the guy that you want this week if you need a tight end. Next up, let's talk about Darrel Williams. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is almost certainly out next week against the Falcons, and Le'Veon Bell got a bit banged up at the end of the game against the Saints. That makes Williams someone who will almost certainly have value next week against Atlanta. Now, the Falcons are tough against running backs, but even if he's healthy, the Chiefs are not going to give Le'Veon Bell 100% of the running back touches. Williams should factor in, and in an explosive offense like Kansas City's, he should have value next week. All right, let's go back to the Browns with our next player, and it's RASHARD Higgins. Again, the Browns play the Jets, and the dumb Rams game notwithstanding, you start your opposing receivers against the Jets. Higgins played the most snaps of any Cleveland skill player yesterday, other than Baker Mayfield, of course, and he finished with 76 yards on 4 catches. That's 95, 68, and 76 yards in his last 3 games with 2 touchdowns. Against the Jets, a big game is waiting for him, and he can be relied on comfortably next week. Next up, let's talk about Salvon Ahmed. Ahmed ran for a whopping 122 yards on 23 carries, scoring a touchdown against the Patriots. Now, if we knew Myles Gaskin were out next week, Ahmed would probably be the top pickup with an incredibly soft matchup against the Raiders. But Gaskin is, as of this recording, expected to return from the COVID-19 reserve list, and the split between the 2 backs is questionable at best. Ahmed is worth a pickup regardless, but his exact value is a bit in question. At number 2 overall, it's Russell Gage. Now, we recommended Gage last week as a pickup, and he came through, seeing 10 targets, hauling in 5 of them for 68 yards and a score. Without Julio Jones in the lineup, Gage is going to see targets and offer a high floor, and although Jones wants to return, next week does seem unlikely. That makes Gage a priority pickup even in a tough matchup against the Chiefs. You know the Falcons are going to need points, they can't run the ball, and that's going to mean enough volume to make Gage a play. If you need a receiver this week, he is the guy. And your top waiver wire pickup for the week is Jalen Hurts. Unless you and everyone else playing for something in your league has a top 3 or 4 quarterback, then Hurts is the obvious guy at number 1. 63 yards rushing, 338 yards passing, and 4 total touchdowns against Arizona, and now the Eagles get the Cowboys. If you need me to explain why Hurts is the number 1 pickup, then you can't possibly be in your championship matchup, right? He's basically a model buster. He offers an incredibly high floor with an incredibly high ceiling, and he's going to be a must-start option next week. Jalen Hurts, championship maker. And that's going to do it for my top 10 waiver wire pickups for week 16 of the 2020 fantasy football season. This was our last waiver wire video for the season. I hope you guys enjoyed it and found value. Don't forget to subscribe here to our YouTube channel here at youtube.com/FantasyPros and follow us over on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at FantasyPros.